Long time no see, long time no speak. But I come back. Hopefully better and bigger. Actually bigger, yeah. I've grown my, my Substack a little bit. I have some subscribers. I see in a month. I feel like I'm doing pretty good. Like I can't complain. Hey, I need tons. But yeah. So today we have a new Substack piece that I'm gonna be talking about, which is gonna basically encompass this whole video, which is Bathong
guys, Bathong Molimo. Guys.
Bathong Sesotho spirituality and religion beyond the colonial lens. Yeah.
How Bathong.
So my whole inspiration for doing this, again, I'm gonna be talking about this book until the end of time. As much as I don't really like the author that much, shame. I love this book. If Sesotho you haven't read this book, what are you doing? Like this, I sure, like I sound like I'm exaggerating when I say this book literally changed my life.
Okay.
Like, if you can, go get this book. I think you can find it at lifestyle books if you're in Masiri. But if you wanna buy it online, I think you can also get it online. Very problematic author, but the content, like I always say, the content is it. He the birthday. He the birthday for real. Like, okay, no, his work is the birthday. He's not the birthday, but his work is the birthday. Like, I highly recommend this book. Oh my goodness. There's just so many things that you don't know as Sesotho. You think you know, but you don't. I'm telling you for a fact. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about the main reason why I wanted to even do the piece. Obviously, outside of this book informing me about certain things that I didn't already know. But I feel like whenever we're talking about African spirituality or Sesotho spirituality, there's always this like homogenization of what it is and what it entails. It's always like, oh, it's ancestral worship, it's ancestral veneration, like that's what people are always referring to all the time when they speak about that. And I feel like there's just so much more to that. It's not just that. Okay, there's more to the story. Right. So yeah, I want to add on to the conversation. It's not just one thing. It's not homogeneous, right? It's very diverse, especially if you read this book.
Read, nigga, read.
Go read this book. I know it's very thick. Shame, I can't lie. It's very thick. Like, I remember even one time someone when they saw it, they asked me, "Are you reading the Bible?" I was like, "No, babes. This is culture right here." Okay. Hey.
Okay. Whatever that means.
Anyways, yeah. So that's what inspired the writing behind that. Outside of what I read, but also just wanted to add on to the conversation that I see. That's not very diverse. Like, there's more to it. Okay. Thank you. And one thing in particular that I want to bring up as well, that I think is very profound, that we're not talking a lot about when we're having this conversation, is ties or relations to Hebrew language and Hebrew culture and Hebrew or Abrahamic religion before the influence of missionaries. Okay, that's a very important thing to point out. So as we all know, or as some of us may know, Basotho are claimed to have migrated from like the northeastern Africa region, so that includes like Egypt and Ethiopia, if I'm not wrong. So those areas there, so they migrated from there, which those regions already have a lot of ties to the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew language, you know, all of that. And I think because those regions are very close to like places like Greece and all of them there, yeah. So that tracks. It tracks why we would have such a strong reference or strong relationships or strong relations in our language and certain religious ideas and beliefs. Right. Okay. So one thing that Eugenie in the book, the author of the book, Eugenie pointed out is the similarities between the languages. So similarities between the Hebrew language and also the Sotho language, which I'm gonna put up a picture and show you guys what I'm talking about. The list is very long. And he goes on to say, he goes on to say, we meet with words in the Setswana, I guess Setswana tongue, which seem to be of Hebrew origin. So Setswana encompassing Setswana and Sotho as well. That's what he meant. And then during his journey of exploration,
I'm finding it.
It take you that long to find it?
It does.
And then during his journey of exploration from where he came from to Africa, he came across I don't know if this was in the Cape, but during his exploration, coming to Southern Africa, coming to Lesotho, and you know, he came across the Khoi, which form part of the Khoisan, and they explained their accounts for their arrival and migration, which is very reminiscent of biblical Noah and the phenomenon of the ark. So he goes on to say, certain Hottentots pretend? What is pretend?
What do you mean by that?
They were telling you their story, like, but anyways, he goes on to say, certain Hottentots is a derogatory term or slur, by the way, so we don't say that anymore. We say Khoi or Khoisan. Even Khoisan is also like kind of problematic, but like in our language we call them Barwa, which I don't know if that's also like a derogatory term, but yeah, that's what we call them. He says certain Hottentots pretend to have learned from tradition that their ancestors arrived in Africa in a great basket. But their extreme aversion to the sea, their absolute ignorance of the first rudiments of navigation, make it more than probable that they entered Africa by the north. Perhaps the legend of the Great Basket may be traced up to the Ark. According to Colburn, who made a stay at the Cape in 1713, the Hottentots of his time asserted that they had sprung from a man called Noah, who had entered the world by a sort of window and who had taught his children the art of raising cattle. So this is very reminiscent of the phenomenon of Noah and his ark and the biblical references that we know. So this is before any kind of influence by the missionaries. So this is when they were coming and they were talking to people about religion and they were telling them about their own religious beliefs. And this tracks again because, as you know, Basotho are very interconnected. So Bathong as well. So Bathong, before they had integrated into integrated into the culture, into Basotho, you know, the tribe, they had their own, you know, sovereign way of doing things. They had their sovereignty. But they also were very interconnected with Bawa or the Khoisa and the Khoikhoi. I'm gonna do a whole other video also about the Khoisa and Bathong and their relationship with the Khoisa and how it all began, the whole thing, the whole shebang, okay? Which gives you, which will give you a better picture of why everything is so connected, you know? But for now, we have this, okay? Yeah. And then there's also a folk tale or a legend, which in Sesotho we also call I almost said Bali. We should call it a tomo. So there's a certain folk tale or tomo that we have that Eugene also references in the book, which I found very profound. It's a folk tale of Kamapa and Ditaolan. He calls it Kamapa, and it's very Modun, but I don't know if anyone has a better explanation or a differing reference. But it's very Modun, but with Eugene Kamapa, according to him. So this is how the legend goes, or the folktale goes. We are told that once all men perished, a prodigious animal called Kamapa devoured them all, large and small. There remained but one woman on the earth who escaped the ferocity of Kamapa by carefully hiding herself from him. This woman conceived and brought forth a son in an old stable. Okay. She was very much surprised on looking closely at it to find its neck adorned with a little necklace of divining charms. And as this is the case, his name shall be Ditaolani, or diviner. Ditaolani then attempted to confront the beast, and as luck would have it, Kamapa, hey, I think it's really literally, Kamapa opened his frightful jaws and swallowed him up, but the child of the woman was not dead. He freed the other people who had also been swallowed by the beast, and then they in turn turned on him and called him a monster for being born from a single sovereign woman and not knowing the spoils of childhood. But he was able to outsmart them and the death traps they set out for him due to his boundless, ever-knowing wisdom. So Eugene then goes on to say, can this tale be a confused tradition of the redemption of man wrought out by Jesus Christ? I certainly should not venture to affirm that it is so. But Kamapa might without much difficulty be supposed to represent Satan. At all ages, the imagination has delighted to clothe his spirit in the most hideous forms, and the evils he has caused have often been compared to the ravages of a wild beast. The supernatural conception of Ditaolani, his birth in a stable, his quality of a prophet, his premature wisdom, the victory he gained over Kamapa by becoming his victim in the persecutions he suffered, seem to be so many points of resemblance to the history of our Savior, Jesus. I must add that the natives declare themselves incapable of giving explanations for this extraordinary legend. Now, I already said that Eugene was a very flawed man, so obviously saying I can't affirm that these natives were telling the truth. These natives were telling the truth. I don't even know the origin of the story. I already told you that he's a very flawed person. I have a whole piece on him as well. This is where sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist. Because obviously, like, Eugene had racial bias, all those things. He had all those things. So and it tracks that he'd be able to like say that he can't reaffirm, or like this was what were his words? It's a confused tradition. What the heck? What the heck? But anyways, yeah. And then something that I also think was very reminiscent of Abrahamic religious practices, were like references to biblical references. Is a rite of passage in Basotho tradition, which we call initiation, where as you know, like it's a rite of passage like both young boys and young girls undergo, but there's something very distinct about the girls' initiation that I also found similar to like Abrahamic religious beliefs and traditions and biblical references, all that jazz. So during the girls' initiations, the girls once they are of age would have to unveil and unclothe themselves to go into the river, where they are told they would go meet a snake or a large serpent, which is I also found to be quite similar to, like I said, Abrahamic religions and the relationship that is portrayed between Eve and the snake. And even Eugene himself was able to draw parallels. So he goes on to say, girls from 12 to 13 years of age are also subjected to a rite, to which certain tribes give the name of circumcision, but which resembles baptism. They are committed to the charge of certain matrons, whose duty it is to watch over them for several months. These women first lead them to a neighboring stream, send them into the water, and sprinkle them. They then hide them separately in the turns and bends of the river, and telling them to cover their heads, inform them that they will be visited by a large serpent. Thus, these poor daughters of Eve have not forgotten the form taken by the arch enemy to deceive their mother. So once again, I feel like these Hebrew references and just the overall relationship that and parallels that even Eugene himself was able to show, they dispel this this idea or this notion that, oh, this is what African spirituality entails. I feel like it's so broad and there's a lot more. And even for people like Eugene himself, that was one of the architects in perpetuating that idea and that notion of calling us savages and heathens and brutes and even he himself, like these things that he was finding out. But I feel like I said it once in another Substack article that I think that Eugene had the case of cognitive dissonance, where he's just, I don't even know how to explain it. One time he'll be believing this, but his racial bias would not allow him to fully grasp the things that he was saying, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's my impression of Eugene. Many of the things that he was saying, they were attesting or agreeing with what he was saying as a missionary, but he just couldn't allow his racial bias to allow him to accept the fact that, you know what, these people also knew God, babes. You're not the only person here who has God, who has a relationship with God, who knows God, and who has these biblical ties, biblical knowledge. You're not the only one, you know. And I feel like his racial bias would not allow him to fully accept that fact, which is a shame.
That's a damn shame.
But yeah, even he himself once again goes on to say, every being to whom the natives render adoration is called Molimo, the signification of which shows that it is by no means of heathen origin. Okay.
Turn this on. Turn it on!
Thank you. And then also, what ties into this idea and notion that no, we were not these savages, we were not these heathens, is also in the way that not only constituted Shusha's leadership style, but also in the precedent that he set out for his entire community, like the people that he was leading, his nation at large. You were able to see his influence, not only his influence, but also their own spiritual influence and their religion. I feel like a lot of the times you can see the impact that people's spirituality and their religious beliefs has on them in the way that they treat each other and other people, which should be the whole basis of what religion is. Really, to me, it's like, do you lead from a place of love or not? You know? And socially speaking, we're able to see, even from the book, that yes, that was what constituted the whole social fabric of the Basotho nation at large. Even Eugene again attests to that. Let's read what he says. Okay, so this is in describing the Basotho people, the Basotho nation. He says, each one feels himself inwardly called upon to watch over the maintenance of a certain exterior morality. The liberty these people enjoy, the facility with which they secretly satisfy their natural inclinations, their total ignorance of fictitious ones, the charm they find in the conversations, the recitals, and the lively studies which constitute the basis of their social life, all prompt them to a much greater observance of decorum than we might have expected to find where vice is not attended with infamy. Then he goes on to say again, living in closer intercourse with nature than we do, they also have learned better than we have how to submit their will to hers being Mother Nature. They will endure acute suffering without a groan or a murmur. Hunger, thirst, fatigue, when they are inevitable, do not alter their serenity. Furthermore, the same kind of feeling is observable in the behavior of the natives, which is polite and flattering. If any kind of food is brought to them while they are in each other's society, however small the quantity may be, everyone must have a taste. Even the children are not forgotten. I have seen a piece of sugar, not larger than a walnut, applied to the lips of at least 10 people before it finally disappeared. There exist among these tribes forms of politeness and rules of etiquette which may not be regarded with impunity. So I all of this, I feel like, dispels that whole perpetuation or narrative that, oh, we're these savages, we're these brutes, we do not know God, we're not godly. Like, no babes. No babes. That is very further from what the truth, much further from what the truth actually is and was. Okay. I feel like you can tell the impact of someone's religious and spiritual ideas and beliefs in the way it impacts and it weaves through their social life and their social fabric. That's the whole point. Isn't that the whole point? It is the whole point. And then something also adding on to that whole ideology of ancestral worship and ancestral veneration. I feel like we should actually there should be a clear definition of the difference between ancestral worship and ancestral veneration. After reading this, I feel like Basotho people were more so inclined to ancestral veneration, and that ancestral veneration was also in part connected to the way they believed in the circle of life and the circle of death, their relationship with the circle of life. Like, everything was just so connected when it comes to them. Like, even when someone dies, they don't just die, you know. I don't even know how to explain it. I think it's all connected. Like, everything is connected. I know I sound crazy, but everything is connected. Like, literally everything. You will see. You'll see it also in the way that they lived, their relationship with sustainability, not only that, but even in their treatment of other people, like everything was connected. So you don't just when you die, you don't just end things. You have to continue that relationship with the people that became before you. And even with you when you are living, you have to be considerate of, am I being a worthy ancestor in this moment? Like, what am I doing to contribute to life right now? I don't know if I'm making sense. I hope I'm making sense. So I think there's a difference between veneration and worship. And from me reading, it was the relationship that they had with the ancestors is more of a veneration. Like you keep that relationship going because everything is just so connected. And also because but certain people they believed in resurrection. So you don't just die, you also go somewhere else, which is not a far-fetched idea. So if they believe that your soul goes somewhere else, of course you're gonna want to keep that relationship with the person, which only makes sense. Like, I don't think it's that far-fetched. Okay, like, it's really not that far-fetched. So yeah, so I honestly believe that Basotho people believed in the ideology of the circle of life and also the circle of death. Like, everything is just connected. And even like I said, even in the leadership of Moshoeshoe himself, I remember there was one time I've also referenced to this in my analysis on King Moshoeshoe as well, which I've also put up. But where he said, I once had 2 rebels thrown over there and have often repented of it. More than once when trouble has come upon me, I have attributed the cause of this act. I have attributed the cause of it to this act of severity. So everything was connected. For every action, there was a reaction, basically. To me, that's my understanding. So this is, I think this is once he had punished a rebel by form of execution, and he just didn't feel pleased with himself for doing that, and he swore to never do that again. And even Eugene recounted that he had never seen, I think he had only ever seen like 2 executions. The most extreme form of like punishment was maybe like exile. So it was never a form of like a Moshoeshoe really didn't believe in that like extreme punishment. He more so believed in rehabilitation of people, you know, things of that nature. I've made a whole video on that. And so I think that also informed their relationship with that that we see nowadays. That also informed their relationship with the
I'm finding it. It take you that long to find it?
It does.
And so I think that also informed the relationship that Basotho people have with, you know how they say, oh, if you do something wrong or if you do something bad, you're upsetting the ancestors, you know. I think that also is that whole like circular belief or circle of life ideology, that for every action there's a reaction, you know. You can't just get away with things, which in other terms other people would say, oh, it's karma, you know. In other religions, I think it's in those Asian religions, they say, oh, it's karma. So I don't think that's very far-fetched. All right. And like I said, the circle of life ideology was also prevalent in also how the Basotho people lived, not only in like their belief in death and what happens in death, you know, that sort of thing. So Eugene goes on to describe what he says is a Basotho village, and he says, the first glance at a village of the Basothos is sufficient to prove that these tribes have long been nomadic. The settlement is nearly always in the form of a vast circle, the circle center being occupied by the flocks, while the huts form the circumference. In the center of the village are enclosures which are perfectly round among those tribes who are still in their primitive condition, and square among those who have yielded to the influence of European civilization. The ground is so holy that it serves as a burial place for the chiefs and their families. So this again attests to that whole circle of life ideology, like everything. To me, reading this, I was able to understand and draw a parallel to that, you know. And then also one thing that I also found adds on to this ideology is that Basotho people believe in resurrection. They believe in resurrection after death, and that there is life beyond the one that we live here in the present. And this was also prevalent in the way that they carry out burials. So this is how Eugene describes a burial in the event of a death. So on the occasion of a death, the face is turned towards the northeast and the hands crossed upon the breast. It is usual to throw into the grave a little crown of couch grass, a few grains of wheat, and some seeds of melon and pumpkin. Sometimes the weapons and part of the clothing of the deceased are thrown into the common sewer. The position of death, which resembles that of the child in the bosom of its mother, grains of wheat, vegetables, and grass deposited near the corpse would seem to be symbolical of resurrection. Which again, it relates back to that whole circle of life ideology, like that there really is no end, you know. And I don't think that's very far-fetched. To me, it tracks. I understand that. I get it, you know. I get it. So yeah, that about encompasses everything that I wanted to talk about. To add on to the conversation, there's so much more that I did not cover in this part of my analysis. There is so much more. Even in the book, there is so much more that I would urge you to go read, urge you to go find out about, and not just take things at face value or take things that people tell you about what Sesotho spirituality and religion is. Go find out for yourself, you know.
Do the knowledge, nigga.
And I think really and truly, like, I don't think anyone can take that away from us, even though they try. Okay, our relationship with God is not something that was introduced to us merely by missionaries or European influence. That's not the truth. All right, it was all a lie. It was all a lie.
It was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie. She lied.
But yeah, I when I say this book, literally, I think it has informed so much of my relationship with the spirit. Can you hear it calling, calling? Yay, spirit. Can you hear it calling, calling? Yay, spirits. Yeah, it has informed so much of my relationship with spirit and spirituality, and I'm hoping that it'll be able to do the same for you. All right. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. So let me know what you guys found helpful in this. What more analysis or analyses you would like to see from me. Yeah. Bye.